For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, your host for this episode of Under the Dome for the week of Monday, June 12th, 2023. I'm here today in the office of Senator Todd Johnson. Johnson's a Republican from Union County. He runs his family's insurance company and owns the cigar shop. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for letting me be with you today.
So we'll talk about policy and fun stuff and farming and cigars and maybe history and military. We'll see what we can cram into about 20 minutes or so. We'll start with policy first, I guess. So the budget is coming out in the next couple of weeks, the final budget. You are on that committee. What day and what's in it?
What day? So you want me to tell you exactly what's in it and what day it's going to come? You know, I heard someone say earlier today, you're doing an interview with Dawn today. I said, yeah. He said, well, she probably knows that budget better than you do, so be prepared. But with the process has been so different than last year, because last year we had all this federal COVID money coming down, and so this year the state's doing pretty good on revenues. But a lot of it's one-time money, and so we've seen the economic forecast of what to expect. So trying to find that or strike that balance between being responsible but also addressing the needs of the state. Another member once told me, he said, it's a lot easier to budget when you don't have any money. And these are folks that have been around back in the days when we were broke and didn't have the funds. So it's been an interesting process, different than the last budget we worked on. But in the end, I'm interested to see what all ends up in there as well. So the time and effort that the men and women that serve on these big chairs or appropriation chairs is unimaginable, and just the sheer volume of things. And a lot of times there's stuff that we want to fund, but we just simply don't have the funds to do it, or it doesn't get prioritized to the level that we wish. But I think we'll probably end up with a budget and be out here before July 1, and that's kind of okay. Now. Call me from Missouri because I want you to show me, don't tell me, but we'll see if it ends up that way. But I think we're still on a path for that. Maybe we can get our summers back, and y'all can too.
Senator Berger is a bit optimistic about, well before the end of the fiscal year, well before it could just mean several hours before the start of the fiscal year. Or a few days, but he was telling, we're recording this on Thursday. People will be listening to this on Monday, but as of Thursday, reporters talked to Berger after the session. He said that kind of what's being sorted out now is taxes and how much to keep in reserves and where. That seems a lot less controversial than maybe the reserves is less controversial, not as much taxes, I guess. But he won't tell us, of course, but he said that the House and Senate have more or less come to an agreement on what the raises are going to be. Do you think that's a bigger deal this year because of the state employee shortages, teacher shortages, just the people's morale and wanting more money from the legislature?
Sure. I think raises are important every year because this is how our state employees and teachers feed their families. And so we get into this push-pull with we would love to give as much as we possibly can without getting back into situations back in the 2008s and 9s where we're laying folks off and hiring freezes and all that. So trying to, again, strike that balance where we can sustain that. And so, with the Senate budget, it had lower raises, and the House budget had higher raises, and those are just steps 1 and 2 in a 3-step process. So a lot of folks tend to get upset about that. But if you kind of understand how the process has worked since well before I got here, it usually ends up somewhere in the middle, and who knows what in this case where it'll end up. But typically with raises, that's going to be more of the big chairs kind of hash that out. And if they can't figure it out, then it gets kicked to the corners, and the speaker and the pro tem will get that figured out. But I expect that there's a push within both chambers to try to help our state employees and our teachers out as much as possible.
So probably closer to what the House wants. And the Senate is known for lowballing raises. Yeah. I mean, it's just what they do, right?
Unfortunately, I don't get to make the call on that. I would like to see something more toward the House position, but I'm one of 50, so I don't get to make that call.
Well, one of 30 that have most of the power, right? So.
Well, we try to not operate in a one of 30 mentality. Mm-hmm. We really try our operate in a 1 of 50 mentality.
Well, let's talk about one of the, not in the 30 or not in the Senate this year, since we're talking about legislation. You sponsored a bill named for former Democratic Senator Kirk Devieux. Why'd you name it for him? And what's the bill?
I had an opportunity to serve with Kirk for 4 years, and we came in together immediately right out the gate. We just hit it off, and he's been a good friend. We don't agree on a whole lot of stuff, but in the end, veterans and their service and their families is very important. I don't think that's a partisan issue. And I saw that, over the 4 years that Senator Devieux was here, he worked diligently to try to get some certain legislation passed. And so even though he's no longer in the Senate, I wanted to continue to work on what he had worked on for 4 years. And I thought no better way to honor the work that he had already put in, the heavy lifting that he had put in, than to go ahead and name the bill after him, which, it's still eligible, and we're going to keep pushing to try to get it heard in finance, because I think it's been referred to finance. I got excited, but to shake it loose from rules, but in the end, we'll have to get it moving in finance. So I'll go have to rattle those cages down there in the finance affairs, so if we can get it heard.
So speaking of bill names, you and Senator Vicky Sawyer last legislative session were known for some pretty good bill names. It caught reporters' attention anyway. We're like, oh, what is this about? Now, we didn't really see that as much this session, except for one called Incentivize Space Spirits, which is not about alien ghosts, I guess.
That's right. Yeah, so it was... in last session was my second term, and you're trying to kind of find your way, and you're trying to kind of figure out a way for your bills to get recognized and get some momentum behind it. So when you come up with crazy names, I'm not going to even repeat it again because that's old news. But when you come up with those names, people start talking about it. And, it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. As long as they're talking about it, it stays on people's minds. And so this time, we've just been working under such a condensed schedule and trying to get legislators their summers back. Mm-hmm. Just not as much more effort was put into the meat of the policy instead of the short titles. So
we can still have a meaty policy with a short title.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But so I'd say Senator Devieux's bill is short title is probably the only one where we kind of got outside the lines a little bit. But I think that was well worth it.
All right. Well, let's talk about how you got into politics. And behind us, for those that have seen the video version of this is your dad, elect Richard H. Johnson, NC Senate. So talk about your family's interest in politics, and then, of course, you were in local government before.
Sure. So my dad ran for the North Carolina Senate in 1982. I was 4 years old at the time, and so he'd come up a little bit short. And then he actually served in the Anson County Board of Education for 28 years. And so being around just local politics and then some state politics with that, there's just always been a desire to serve. And Dad's always been very philanthropic. He's worked in local boards and all these things, just always been very involved. And that's how we were raised, were to be involved. And so I remember in 2010, the county commissions in Union County, where I've lived for 20 plus years, someone reached out to me and said, hey, you need to consider running for county commission. And so the first person I called, obviously, is my hero, my dad. And I said, Dad, I'm thinking about doing this. He'd retired from politics at that point in time. And I said, what do you think I should do? And he said, son, you do it. You do a phenomenal job. You got a good head on your shoulders. Make me one promise. I said, okay, what's that? He said, don't govern based on re-election. Don't worry about re-election. Just do what's right for the people you serve. So I do still try to do that today. Also, we've always traveled with going to historical battle sites, and history's just been so important. History and politics kind of go together. And my brother was a U.S. history teacher, and so it's been around it our whole life. And so we did the county commission thing and did it for 4 years. And I'll tell you, I have the utmost respect for local elected officials because I've been there, I've done it. It is not an easy task. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, with the county commission on Monday night, when we make a decision on Monday nights, someone's life was affected Tuesday morning, regardless of if it was positive or negative. Whereas in the state legislature, we'll pass a bill and it may go into effect 3 months from now, and someone may feel the experience of it 6 months from there, so it's not as immediate. The local elected officials, they do the blocking and the tackling. I mean, that is some really tough jobs.
And people will just tell you during public comments, right there. It's not like in the Senate where they're not, or they're in the gallery.
In church, in the grocery store, walking down the street. I think one of my, I say favorite, but one of the worst things I ever heard was a person came up to me at the grocery store and said, "I don't know how you sit in church on Sunday with your family and look the preacher in the eye." It's like,
okay.
Well, okay. But it's tough. And you're dealing with a lot of complex stuff, and it affects people's lives. So, but been around politics and history my whole life, and just look for the opportunity to serve when I can.
What did you respond? Do you remember?
It hit me off guard, but I said, of course I would, because that's how Dad's always operated. He would just, on that board, 8-1 votes or 6-1, I can't remember if it was 7 or 9, whatever. I mean, he would be the one sometimes, not to be an obstructionist, but if he didn't believe in it, he didn't worry about if that was going to cost him an election or not.
What did your parents do for a living?
So my dad was a farmer for years, and so then after in '96 he closed his farm and then went full time in the insurance. And so then my mother was a banker for 30 or 25 years, and then she now works in the agency. So my parents are 81 and 80 and still work in the insurance office every day.
I'm sure she has thoughts on appropriations.
I'm sure she does.
We're going to have to take a quick break, and we'll be back talking with Senator Johnson. We'll talk about legislative cafeteria food, headliner of the week, and whatever else we can cram in. We'll be right back. You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm News and Observer State Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with Senator Todd Johnson, a Union County Republican. We've talked about policy, about you growing up. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Your dad ran Winn-Dixie's at one point, or Winn-Dixie, is that right? And then also, let's talk about farming. Sure.
So Dad was worked for the Winn-Dixie Corporation. He was the guy that they would bring in to a struggling store in some part of the region. So the last one that I think he was at was in Sanford, North Carolina. That was before I was born. But he would be the guy that would come in, run them for 1 year, and then go on to the next. And so he has seen a lot over his time with that. But it also taught him how to work with people and to work with employees and listen to employees. And so he's helped train me with that. And so you can still see those habits and see those actions in the work he does today, because he's 81 and still works every day. So
my dad only just recently retired in the past month or two, and he also just turned 80. So
awesome.
You and I have like a fair amount of things in common, including our love of history, which we were talking about before we started recording this podcast. We could probably do an all history podcast. But
my colleagues would tell you that I would be down with that anytime. But sometimes they start rolling their eyes when I start talking about history.
Coming soon, Under the Dome History Edition, 50,000 segments podcast. Let's talk about, there's so much that I could, and we'll circle back to history another time, I think. But let's move on. Before we get to our headliners of the week, what I ask all the lawmakers in the building is, what do you get for lunch or breakfast, I guess, in the legislative cafeteria? Or since a lot of these that we've done in lawmaker offices were in the LOB, which has its own hybrid snack bar cafeteria. So what do you get?
So this is a little open-ended because I was hoping you'd say, what's my favorite thing?
Okay, what's your favorite?
Okay, what's my favorite thing? So I was thinking of all the delicious treats that they serve at the legislative cafeteria. And the one thing I could finally determine that I actually enjoyed eating is the mixed fruit jelly. And that sounds really strange, but that should also put into perspective what I think about a lot of the other stuff that's served. Now, mixed fruit jelly is the jelly that everyone wonders, who eats that? Because most people want the grape or they want the strawberry. But they always have that third one that no one eats. And who eats that? Well, I'm the guy that eats that. So Christy, who is she's the lady who serves in the legislators' dining area. And she's out there. She takes great care of us, but she always makes sure that I have a little jar of mixed fruit jelly there. So I'll get a little biscuit or a roll, and I'll put that mixed fruit. That's my favorite cafeteria item.
Like, is it like Jell-O?
It's in the same packs as grape and strawberry, but this one is mixed fruit. And no one eats.
Just regular jelly.
Regular
but the flavor
jelly.
is mixed fruit.
The flavor is mixed fruit.
I've
and that's
never seen that before.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Legislative Cafeteria exclusive.
And I know where they keep it. And it's hidden, and I know where they hide it at. So if you want to know, come see me.
It's sort of like if you get the honey mustard in the snack bar, like you have to ask for it, and it's in the fridge, and it does cost 60 cents extra, I think. So.
Well, and they're still losing money on the cafeteria. So.
I mean, it's taxpayer subsidized food.
That's
it's
correct.
A pretty good deal, I think. You know,
only place that fish, chicken, beef, and pork all taste the same. No, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. They work hard.
We all love the cafeteria, even though it's it's cafeteria food.
Sure.
So we'll get shout out to K&W, which used to be in the Village District in Raleigh that isn't around anymore. So at least we have the legislative cafeteria for all our cafeteria needs. All right, let's move on to our picks for headliner of the week. Yours is more newsy and something we haven't mentioned yet, so you go first.
It's got to be sports betting coming to North Carolina. It's folks who are on different sides of the issue. It's actually been pretty bipartisan in its support and bipartisan in its folks that are against it. And so it's going to be new and different for North Carolina. But in the end, I'm excited to see what happens. I think the bill sponsors did a phenomenal job in trying to craft it to where there's protections in place for the consumers, but also that the state can get some proceeds to address other needs of the state.
I will note that the Senate usually, we were talking earlier about, the Senate has the lower raises and the House has the higher raises. And then the Senate wants to cut taxes more than the House. But the Senate wanted a higher tax on sports betting, which is the final number was 18%, which is still pretty low compared to, was it New York or something, has like 4 times as much as that.
You can't use New York as an example for taxation.
There are a lot more sports there. Maybe there's a lot more gambling there. So
a lot more taxes there in general.
So what's your, I guess it's a different question on sports, who you think would win and be worth betting on versus who you root for. So who are your North Carolina teams?
Chapel Hill grad, so I'm a Tar Heel through and through. I like the Panthers, but I like the 2015 Panthers, the one where we could enjoy watching them go to the Super Bowl. It's been tough watching them the last few years, but I'm excited to see what some of the changes they've made. And of course, the Hurricanes, we this was the year, and we had it, and then we just kind of ran into the buzzsaw when we played Florida. But in the end, I enjoy watching it. We're just blessed in North Carolina to have great sports and college, professional, and I even love minor league baseball too. It's fun to go to.
Do you like the Bulls? Who's your team?
Charlotte Knights, because I live down that way, so it's easier for me to go over there.
Have you ever heard of this baseball team that you were talking about, jelly on biscuits? They're called the Montgomery Biscuits.
Oh, I haven't, but I'm sure I would be a fan of them. I like biscuits.
I assume it's me too. I assume it's Montgomery, Alabama. I don't even know. I saw that there was a baseball team called the Biscuits, and I followed them on Twitter because their logo, their mascot is literally a biscuit.
Wow.
So
I'll have to check them out.
I'm like, okay, I'm on board with this. So. All right, my pick for headliner of the week is also newsy, but it kind of ties into history that we touched on a little bit. Maybe on another episode we'll talk more about that. And Senator Johnson and I were talking about our interest in military history too in different wars. So anyway, my headliner of the week is Fort Liberty, also known as Fort Bragg, which had its official name change this year. As we're recording this on Thursday, President Biden is coming down to check it out. And I guess this has been in the works of the DOD for at least the past year or whatever. So Fort Bragg for me was my best childhood memories. I lived there in 1st and 2nd grade. My dad was stationed there. He was in JSOC at Fort Bragg, and his dad was also stationed at Fort Bragg in military intelligence. My parents got married in the chapel at Fort Bragg. But anyway, it's all Fort Liberty now, which is great. No one's ever going to say, I don't like Liberty. Let's change the name. Some people criticize that it wasn't named after, a variety of other people. But again, no one's ever going to say, not for liberty anymore, because I think we all agree we like liberty. I think that's true. So, all right. Well, thanks so much for being on. We'll talk only about history next time, or something.
I'm looking forward to that.
Or mixed fruit jelly.
Hey, go try some mixed fruit jelly. I'm telling you, it'll change your life.
All right. I'm Dawn Vaughan with Senator Johnson for the News and Observer. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.